privilege once again to be here. And it's tonight that I stand before you that I have a little bit of a mixed emotion because the congregation here has been supporting James and Emily Kamek in New Zealand for a few years now. And they've invited me to come to New Zealand and preach some for them there in the country to a couple of different congregations. And it's a mission trip that we've been planning, the elders and I have been planning for a few months now, since well into last summer. And the date's Tuesday. And so this is the last time I'll be with you for a few weeks anyway, until the end of the month. So Tuesday, I would ask that you remember me as a travel. Remember Julie during this time as well as while I'm gone. The flight I'll be in the air somewhere around 20 hours. So remember me cramped up in the seat, with the belt extension and everything. Remember all that. And also the work that is over there. We have an opportunity to look at the work firsthand that we've been supporting for a couple of years. Plan on bringing a report back about James and Emily Kamek. She is also, if you've been keeping up with the newsletters that they've been sending out, she is with child. I think she's 35 weeks or 36 weeks or so, and so very possible that I might get to see their child born while I'm there. And have an opportunity to preach several times. I think I've got 12 to, I think they added 2 more sermons, so 14 different sermons that I'll be preaching while I'm there. And then, of course, the journey back. And so, lot to be thankful for the opportunity to go. I appreciate the elders and their confidence in me and allowing me to go and supporting me to go, and the congregation here. This is a great opportunity. This will be actually my 3rd time to go to New Zealand. I went for the first time in 2000 and the second time in 2004, and Julie was able to go with me that time. But it's been 10 years, so I'm kind of anxious to see what the differences are, how things have changed, and how the work has progressed in different areas of the country as well, and of course to reunite with James and Emily for a little while and spend some time with them, encouraging them in the work which they are doing. So that all kicks off on Tuesday, and it's funny, I'll be flying, I'll leave on Tuesday, and I'll get there on Thursday, because you cross 18 time zones, and the flight itself is around 20 hours. I get to land in Tahiti, but I think it's only like a 2-hour layover, so I'm not going to be in Tahiti all that long. But then coming back, I'll leave on a Thursday, and I'll get back 2 hours later on Thursday. So I gain all that time back. It just takes a little time. It's like, I spent a week one time there or summer one time in a week I messed up that joke, didn't I? So anyway, but the whole idea, that there's going to be a lot of time pass in those 2 hours. And so really excited about it and the opportunities that we have. When we think about God and we think about the opportunities we have in His kingdom as Christians, one of the things that I'm reminded of is Jesus' great Sermon on the Mount. And we've been studying that on Wednesday nights, looking at how he is presenting for us living the kingdom life in a fallen world. And we have not got all the way to chapter 7 yet in our study, but at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, you recall he says that the one who hears my word and does them, or hears them and keeps them, I will liken him unto a wise man that built his house upon the rock. Tonight we want to spend a little time looking at the concept of building our foundation up on the rock of Jesus Christ, upon the rock of His truth. In Matthew chapter 16, as Jesus and His disciples are traveling towards Caesarea Philippi, He asks, "Who do the people say that I am?" And you'll recall that Peter tells them that some say that you're John, some say Elijah, others one of the prophets, but who do you say that I am? And Peter boldly proclaims, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter there speaks not only Jesus as the Son of God, but he speaks the truth upon which the foundation of the church is going to be built. Jesus would say to him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonas, for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, but my Father who is in heaven. And upon this rock I will build my church." And I know in the history of religion there has been confusion about what he is speaking of, but Jesus is speaking about that confession of the truth of Jesus as the Son of the living God. On that truth I will build my church. And he has. We look around and we see that the foundation of Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that the truth which He came to this world to bear witness of, John 18 and verse 37, that He came to this earth to personify and embody, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," John 14 and verse 6. Jesus being the truth becomes the foundation, not just Him as a person, but Him as the embodiment of what is true and right in this world. If you have your Bibles, I encourage you to turn with us to Luke chapter 6. I know I started there at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, but here in Luke chapter 6, Jesus gives another account, Luke gives us another account of Jesus' great statement about building our house upon the rock. And he begins a little differently here in Luke when he says, "Why do you call me Lord and not do what I tell you?" In other words, why are you living contrary to being doers of the Word? I believe this morning I said James chapter 2. It's James 1 verse 22. Be doers of the Word and not hearers only. It's a truth that we learn from the very inception of our Christianity, and no matter how many years we've been a Christian, it is still valuable and insightful to us in this very moment. Be doers of the Word and not hearers only. Why? Because if you're a hearer, you're like the man who beholds himself in the mirror. He primps and he preens and he does everything that he's supposed to, and then he turns away and he forgets what he looks like. Do I have blonde hair? Do I have a beard? Am I big? Am I small? He forgets what manner of man he is. Jesus is telling us that would be unnatural. It's just as unnatural to be a hearer of the Word and not a doer. Jesus here says, "Why do you call me Lord?" which implies a submission to His will and His work. Why do you call me Lord? For a slave to refer to one of his master, that means that he is beholden to him, and his master's wishes are what he does. Jesus said, "Why would you call me Lord? Why would you call me Master?" Which signifies that I am in control of your life and yet not do the things that I tell you. It is unnatural to believe that you are a follower of Christ without following Christ. "Everyone who comes to me," He says in verse 47, "and hears my word and does them, I will show you what he is like." And now we pick back up with the ideas of Matthew. I will show you what I'm going to demonstrate for you by comparing it to something that you well know, the building of a house. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came tumbling down. It's a simple song that we teach our children, but it's about the difference between wisdom and foolishness. We need to understand what it is that makes the wise man, what it is that makes the foolish man. He says he is like a man who has built his house, who building a house has dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. When the floods arose, the stream broke against the house and could not shake it because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do is like the man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately fell, and ruin of that house was great. What is it going to take to build our house on the foundation? Jesus gives us some interesting concepts here. Things that if we will consider them, can make us stronger as Christians. The first thing, as we go and we look and we see this building of the house, he says, I'm going to show you what he's like. He is like the one who has dug deep. It's not just about the building of the structure. It's not just about laying the foundation. But notice he has dug deep. Why do we dig deep? when I was in Granite. It was the very first work that I started when I was out of school. It was my first full-time preaching job. I remember being there just a couple of weeks, and I was called upon to do a funeral. And whenever I was talking to the funeral director and all that, and he said, "Well, we've got to go out to Rock Hill Cemetery." Rock Hill Cemetery in Granite, Oklahoma. What does that mean? You had about this much topsoil on top of the granite rocks. And when they would actually dig their graves, they would drill holes, plant dynamite, and blow the rock out. Why? Because there was solid rock under that dirt. There was something, if you went out there with a shovel or with a track hoe or anything like that, it was impossible to break through the rock. Yes, you could dig off that first maybe foot or foot and a half of topsoil if you were lucky, but then it was solid rock. Jesus says the wise man is the one who understands that the firm foundation, sometimes you have to dig the dirt away. You've got to remove the debris in order to actually see the rock. And that's where you lay your foundation. That's what you build your house upon, is the foundation of that rock. The foolish man, on the other hand, doesn't take the time and the energy and the effort that it takes to dig away the dirt, to get away from all the debris that's in the way and dig to that foundation. He looks at it, he surveys the land, and he says, that looks good enough for my house. And you know what happens? The floods come. In this particular part of the world, the mountainous region would drain off toward the Jordan River Valley. And the little tributaries that ran into the Jordan River from the mountains were called wadis. The wadis would overflow very quickly, and when they did, what was a stream that you might hop across on a daily walk became a torrent as it would stream down the valleys or down the streams toward the valley itself, and flow into the Jordan River. And he says the rains came and the waters came up, and these little tributaries have filled, and those houses which were once safe near the river are now in the midst of the stream itself. The water is sloshing and beating against the house itself. Where I was growing up in Caddo, Oklahoma, there was a small town, even smaller than Caddo, if you can imagine, called Armstrong. And the Blue River went right through Armstrong, Oklahoma. And there was this one of those metal truss bridges, that you crossed over on Highway 69 there. And just off to the side, there was a house. And they had built close to the river, but they had this slab that they built on top of tunnels, hopefully or ostensibly to let the water drain and flow underneath the house without carrying the house away in case of a flood. I remember many times when the rains came and the river came up, seeing that water flow underneath the house. But at other times I remember seeing it flow into the house, covering over the slab that they had built, thinking high enough to get out of the water. And that house isn't even there anymore. As the rains came up and beat against the house, even though it had a foundation, it was not the kind of foundation that was going to last long. Jesus said that when the floods rose, they beat against the house, and they beat against the house, and it says that it could not shake it. Same term that is used in Hebrews 12 and verse 28 when he says that we have a kingdom that cannot be shaken. It is not in danger of falling because it is soundly built upon the foundation of the rock. On the other hand, the lazy, foolish man simply looks at the ground, surveys it, maybe scrapes off a little bit to level it up a bit, and he builds his house, it says, without a foundation. We've seen houses like that too. You go in the front door and there's a dirt floor because the house is literally built right on the ground. No foundation. And when the waters came and the floods came up and the stream was flowing by. It began to beat against that house, and it fell. It fell because there was no foundation. There was nothing secure, nothing solid beneath the house. If you've ever went to the beach and you've stood at the water's edge and let the waves flow up to your feet, maybe your mid-shin or so, and then the water flows out again, and it comes in and it goes out, and in just a little while, it removes the sand beneath your feet, and you sink a little deeper. And if you stay, it continues to wash the sand out, and you sink a little deeper. Why? Because the foundation itself is not secure. That's the foolish man. We have those visuals. We can see the house falling. But it's not just about seeing the house that is solid and the house that is weak. It's not just about seeing one stand against the tides and one fall. It's about understanding what it takes to make our house or build our lives on a solid foundation. We know the foundation is the bedrock truth of God. As we noticed earlier in Matthew chapter 6, Matthew 16, the great confession, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." That is the bedrock of truth, and our lives need to be built on that truth. And if we are not building our house on the teachings of Jesus Christ, then we are building a unsound house, one that is guaranteed to fall. But it's not just about hearing the message of Christ. Specifically in this context, it's about hearing and doing. It's about acting upon it. Well, there's a lot of things that might keep us from acting on the truth of God, to keep us from doing. I think one of them is that we don't understand what we hear. You know, we have a lot of background noise to our lives. You think about Jesus in the clear statement, whoever hears and does these things, that's pretty simple. But we're living in a world that's telling us, don't worry about doing. It's not as important as others might think. It's not important for you. And of course, if you do everything that Jesus tells you to do, then you look a little odd, a little bit different. Your life is going to be challenged in ways that you really don't need to be challenged. And so that truth of Jesus Christ becomes clouded by the ways of the world. And that's what brings the spiritual in conflict with the secular. They collide with one another. Those who say, well, there's nothing beyond this world. There is no God. There is no heaven. There is no hell. There is nothing beyond this material world. The physical. You see, that's some of the debris and the dirt that gets in the way from us seeing the truth of God. And we've got to be diligent enough to dig away that dirt so we can see the rock. We live in a time when people are saying, who's to say that your way is better than anybody else's way? I mentioned the other night in Bible class, some of you may not have been in here, but you think about the message that we are sending from the world, that when you declare something to be true, Jesus is Lord. The greatest sin you could do is tell someone, you need to believe this too. From the world's point of view, the absolute worst thing you could do is intimate to someone that they're wrong if they don't agree with you. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the church have bought into this idea, and so we make caveats about everything we believe. This is what works for me. Jesus is Lord for me. But for you, it might be something different. You see how we're changing the perception. Jesus said, I am the way. To me, Jesus is the way. But if you have another way that you are more comfortable with, that's okay. That's good for you. That's how the world wants us to be. Wants us to be so weak and watered down that we are ineffective in challenging the devil and his ways. Let me tell you something. When you say that we cannot proclaim boldly the Word of God, that's the devil getting in. That's not following God. That's following the devil. And he's getting into our lives. That's what we call relativism or a pluralism. That what's right for me may not be right for you. And what's right for you may not be for me. And so every one of us has our own concept of truth. Every one of us has our own principles that we're going to live by. And while those principles might be in conflict with one another, that's okay, because there are multiple ways and multiple truths. That's why we get the idea of pluralism. That's some of that debris that covers over the foundation of God's truth. And we've got to dig that out. We've got to get rid of that. The concept that says that we as human beings are the pinnacle of the world. Humanism. What we say goes. We are part of an evolutionary process, and we're just the pinnacle of that evolution. And we have grown out of animals, and so if every once in a while we act like animals, it's justifiable because we are just animals according to this doctrine. Humanism is one of those things that puts man as God. Well, there's nothing beyond this. There's no supernatural. There's no spiritual. There's no heaven. There is no God. So whoever's at the top of the food chain must be God. Lo and behold, it's us. Humanity. Humanism. That's one of those doctrines that clouds the issue of the truth of Christ. And we've got to dig it out. We've got to be diligent to get rid of that dirt. We've got to dig down to the rock. If not, we're just building our lives on the ways of our culture. We refer to it as our worldview. What is the framework of how we view life? And if we don't have a biblical worldview, if we've not accepted God's worldview for us, we're going to have notions about life no matter what. And if we're not going to accept God's truths about lives, we're stuck accepting the world's truths, which are not truth at all. The world's ideas and the world's principles. And you know what happens? When we accept the world's ways, we're leaving the dirt in place. And we're like the lazy, foolish man who comes along and just going to build my house right there. Not hearing properly is going to keep us from building on the foundation of God's truth. It's going to keep us from doing because we didn't hear it right to begin with. So let's dig down to the rock. Let's see the truth. Let's see what Jesus died to bring us. And then, let's determine to do. That's the other side of that coin. If the first side is, be careful how you hear, which the Bible tells us, then we need to be diligent to do what God has commanded us. Christianity, we've seen this morning, is we have a duty. God has obligated us to live a certain way. Now, sometimes we'll not do because we're lazy. Just like the man surveying the ground here. He looks out, and it looks fine. His house is all crooked and wompy-jawed, not square, not plumb. It's nothing right. And it's going to fall. Why? Because he was too lazy to dig down to the rock. I think sometimes we as Christians are a little too lazy to follow. Because the fact is we get in habits that are wrong. Maybe we're not attending services like we should. That's a habit that we've got to get out of. Or maybe we're not coming to Bible class, and that's a habit that we've got to get out of. Or maybe we're not studying our Bible regularly. We're not praying regularly. Maybe we're not having the opportunity, or we're not using the opportunities to evangelize, or, as we said this morning, to be compassionate towards others. It's because we're in the habit of not doing, and it takes effort to start doing. We're living right now at the beginning of the year. A friend of mine said, I can't believe it's been a whole year since I didn't become a better person because of his resolutions. We start these resolutions that I'm going to be better. But you know why 90% of resolutions fail? Because we're too lazy to stick with it. That's really what it comes down to. Because we're too lazy to stick with it. Do you know why sometimes we'll say, I know I need to be a better Christian, but we don't become better Christians? Because we're too lazy to stick with it. I know sometimes it may not be about laziness. It may be about the influence that we have from the world. Well, my friends aren't doing it. My family doesn't do it. I don't see other Christians doing it. And so we think because of those ideas, we don't have to do it. And we're poorly influenced. Fear might hold us back from doing the will of God. God says, I didn't give you a spirit of fear and timidity. I gave you a spirit of boldness. He has set us on a track of boldness to do what He has told us to do and given us the strength and the opportunity to do those things. But what if I lose my job? What if I lose my friends? What if my family turns their back on me? I know those are real concerns. Maybe your real concern there is your family, or maybe your real concern is your job. I know those are legitimate concerns that we're worried about or we're concerned about at times. But He did not give us a spirit of fear. So we can't let the influence of the world, we can't let our laziness, we can't let our fear stand in the way of doing. Write a list. You won't need much paper. Make a list of all the legitimate reasons we have for not doing God's will. It's a short list, isn't it? Brethren, we have been empowered by the only God, the great God. Gives us everything that we need, everything that we need for life and godliness that pertains to our spiritual survival. There is nothing we lack. And so we have to have the heart and the determination and the influence one toward another to take shovel in hand, put a little muscle into it, dig away all the debris, and get to the foundation that God has prepared for you. Tonight, if you are built upon the dirt, the shifting sands of the world and its ways, the shifting sands of hearing but not doing, the shifting sands of not hearing properly, here's the gospel. Jesus is Lord. He is the Son of God, and He died for me. We can all say those same words. He died for me. And that invokes in me a response. Is my life dedicated and committed to Him? Have I obeyed the gospel? Those are the things that we need to be asking ourselves because of what He has done for me. And if tonight the answer to your question about, am I His? Am I faithful? If those answers are no, let's change that. Let's become His child. obeying the gospel, being baptized for the remission of our sins so we can be added to the church. Don't let sin stand in our way anymore. Take the grace of God. And if you're separated from Him, if your relationship with God is somewhat strained, here's the counseling that we need to strengthen the bond between us again. If you have a need tonight, we ask you to come and respond to His invitation while we stand and while we sing.